Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here. Just Shove Your Ministry with God Israel Yarah. Thank you again for being there. We're back. This week, quality should be better. No glitching. Last week, I had a little bit of glitch. We're working on some, technicalities, but little by little, we'll get better. Okay, we will improve. So, this week, we will continue with the weekly Torah portions. Today, as I record, is the first night of Hanukkah. So Sameach Hanukkah is the commemoration and the remembrance of those men that stood for the honor of Adonai, the temple, and the rededication of that, which will happen again, hopefully in our times, through our Messiah. And so, in this first night of Hanukkah, we're going to talk about Torah portion Vayeshev, right? And that is in Genesis. So let's get started. So like I said, this week's Torah portion is Vayeshev, and it is in Genesis 37, verse 1 to Genesis 40, verse 23. The Haftarah portion of the prophets is Amos, chapter 2, verses 6 to chapter 3, verse 8. And the Brit Hadashah, or New Testament portion, is Matthew, chapter 1, verses 1 through 6, and verses 16 through 25. Last week's Torah portion was Vayishlach, recounted how Jacob had wrestled with a mysterious angel before returning to the promised land to be reconciled with his brother Esau. No longer named Jacob, heel holder of Esau, but Israel, prince of God, or one that prevails with God. A transformed Jacob finally returned to Hebron to see his father Isaac. He was nearly 34 years after he had left home. However, on the way back home, his beloved wife Rachel died while giving birth to his 12th son, Benjamin. This week's Torah portion begins with Jacob living back in the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and his 12 sons. But the narrative quickly turns to Jacob's favorite son, Joseph, who was 17 years old at the time. The Torah states that Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons, since he was the son of his old age, and he was the firstborn son of his beloved wife Rachel. Indeed, Jacob made him an ornamented tunic to indicate his special status. So, here, for this narrative, that we've spoken about this before, how Joseph obtained some type of favoritism by his father over his brothers, due to obviously the love they have for Rachel, his beloved one, but also it is characterized as Joseph basically telling his brothers, I would call it doing the right thing when we really think about it, and him being the firstborn, the one that is the one that is carrying that responsibility that Reuben lost, that Judah lost, that Simeon and Levi lost. Now Benjamin is the one that has to carry it later on, but in this process, Joseph is the one in line, and so he's the one that's being the responsible adult in this case. And so as the narrative unfolds, the responsible adult gets labeled as the evil one, right? And so I talked about this last year, as if we see Joseph as the problem or as a negative figure, then we need to look and introspect into ourselves and see what we need to work on, because Joseph, above all things, in his immaturity and his young age, he was trying to do the right thing, which is what we should all be doing. Okay, so let's continue with the narrative and see where we're going today. Now, before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. ברוך אדוני חי לעולם באה, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Bless Adonai who is blessed, bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. So, this week's Torah portion starts the following way. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megure abiv be'eretz Canaan. And in English, it says the following. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended to his father's flocks. He worked for his father's brothers, or his half-brothers, his sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers about it, they hated him even more. Now, this is where the narrative starts to unfold in a very negative way for Joseph. Right? He speaks about the two dreams. His brothers misinterpret the dreams based on their insecurities. And so Joseph doesn't do a great job delivering them, I would say, in a way. But overall, Joseph is doing the right thing, right? He's watching out for his father's honor. He's making sure that his brothers are aligned. And he's having visions from God in which he doesn't know how to interpret them, but they seem to hint to him being the leader, and obviously his father and his sons and his brothers following him and bowing down to him in some type of way, right? And so they get very negative about this, and they betray their brother, right? And you guys should be reading the Torah portion, and you should know what is transpiring behind the scenes, right? And then as they sell their brother, they plot to kill him before, and now Joseph, and what we're going to talk about today, finds himself in Egypt. Okay, so let's get to that. Let's get to the reading. So it says, Joseph in Potiphar's house. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, and Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Remember, here Joseph had been sold, been threatened by his brothers, not only, directly from his father and his mother and his stepmothers, but also from the descendants of Ishmael and Esau, right? These other family members sold them too, right? So he's been sold by all the family members, the good ones, the bad ones, and now he's with Potiphar in Egypt. Okay, he's a slave. Okay, so he becomes a slave after being the favorite son. It says here, Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him. The name Potiphar means devoted to the sun, right? The sun god. It was a name connected with the Egyptian religious system. Genesis 39 says, 1-5, when Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was captain of the guard of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of the Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar and his household for Joseph's sake. All his household and affairs went smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So it's very interesting, the turn of events, right? Here Joseph is favored by his father. He is betrayed by his brothers and becomes a slave, right? A type of humiliation, right? You are demoted from a status based on doing the right thing, right? You were crowned the chosen, the one with the gifts, the one with the ability, and now you are humbled, you are humiliated, and you are betrayed, and you have become a slave now to this nation, this powerful nation. And this powerful nation in a way becomes blessed by your presence and by the way you carry yourself, right? And in this case is Joseph, right? Joseph appears in the scene as a slave in Potiphar's house, which is a servant officer of the sun god Ra. In this case, Pharaoh being the son of God, right? Now here Joseph is becoming a blessing, right? God prospers Potiphar because of the preservation of Joseph. Okay, it was very interesting, the dynamic that the narrative presents, because Joseph is out of his element, right? He is not with the chosen people in the chosen land, in the promised family. He is scattered among the nations, and now he is in a way being a light to the nations. Okay, and so let's continue. Joseph was a slave. He seemed to have no control over his destiny, but he was bought and sold like a piece of property. He could have ended up with anyone, but Potiphar bought him. Right? Now, we often complain to God that he puts us in terrible or difficult places. Yet God's will is that we trust him to guide us and help us find success as he measures success wherever we are. Okay? And externally, it did not always appear that God was with him, with Joseph, for he did not always seem to be prosperous. But when you come to look into the inmost soul of a servant of God, you see his true likeness. He lived in connection with the Most High, and God blessed him, right? And it's interesting because this is one of the highlights. One of my favorite parts of this story is how Joseph is able to embody the image of the servant of God. And his service speaks louder than anything that he can say or do in his situation. And so the testimony of Joseph is very powerful. Let's continue. So Genesis 39 verse 6 says, so Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about anything except what kind of food to eat. Joseph was very handsome and well-built young man. And so this is what introduces the narrative of Potiphar's wife, right? That entices him and basically becomes a stumbling block in Joseph's path. But we're not going to talk about the wife right now. We're going to keep it at this introduction, because remember, Adonai favors Joseph. And this story is very interesting, how it sets up the favor of Joseph, the description and the manifestation of the favor that God is giving his servant, because his servant is suffering. His servant is in the midst of chaos, right? And the chaos that Joseph finds himself in is not a chaos that he caused, right? And we can infer that he caused it because he was tattletelling, and but in reality, again, the narrative says that he was doing the right thing. He was making sure that his brothers were aligned, that his father's honor was protected. And so our interpretation of it being negative has a lot to do with our own insecurities and our own inconsistencies. And so I love about this story of Joseph and his brothers is that in a way, in the beginning of this narrative, Joseph becomes a slave, but it's free. And his brothers become slaves in their freedom, right? Because they lied, right? And they have to live and cling to that lie that they, don't know where Joseph was, that Joseph got eaten by wolves. And so they have to live with this burden of the lie. They become slaves of that painful and dreadful pain that his father is starting to feel, Jacob is feeling, because the son of the promise, the chosen one in this case, has been taken from him, and unexpectedly and inexplicably. And so their brothers become slaves in freedom, right? And Joseph, in his slavery, has become free in the midst of this chaos, okay? So, what do we learn? Matthew 20, verse 25 and 26 says, "But Jesus called them together and said, You know that the rulers in this world lord over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be leader among you must be your servant," right? And so this is key in the story of Joseph, because even though he is forced to be put in this position of servitude, he does it at a high regard. He does it with value and care, with the utmost respect to what he represents and what he embodies, which is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the promise, right? Because God favors Joseph in the midst of the nations. He prospers them, and he becomes free. He's free to dictate life, to bring forth life and light, not by the way he explained it or he debated it, not by the way that he argued it and established it, by the way he lived it. Okay? Now it says here, Matthew 20, verse 27 to 28, "And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Right? And that's the beauty and the parallel with Joseph and Messiah. That servant that is willing to give his life in the service of the higher mission, the preservation of life itself, not his own, but of many. The humbleness to understand that it's not about our light, it's about the light. You know, it's like the Hanukkah, right? There's a tradition. Some will argue it's pagan, some won't. Some will argue it's pagan. At the end of the day, the middle candle becomes a servant candle, which is the one that is lit first to light each candle each day of Hanukkah. Beautiful tradition. And that is what we do as light. As candles, we light others. As servants, God, in his will and mercy, uses us to light others, to be a light to others. So it's an incredible blessing for us to be in this position. Now, we continue. "Look at my servant," Matthew 12, verse 18, "whom I have chosen. He is my beloved, who pleases me, and I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations." This is the key, because this is what Joseph does. Joseph, with his testimony, becomes a preservation of life, not only to Israel, right, to his brothers, but to Egypt and those that are going to be impacted by the famine, right? Now, let's close out. Isaiah 42, verse 1 through 4 says, "Look at my servant whom I strengthen. He is my chosen one, who pleases me. I have put my spirit upon him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or raise his voice in public. He will not crush the weakest reed or put out the flickering candle. He will bring justice to all who have been wronged, and he will not falter or lose heart until justice prevails throughout the earth. Even distant lands beyond the sea will wait for his instructions." This beautiful servant, who is depicted in Joseph, who Joseph embodies in the description, he waits quietly for the instruction of the Father. He lives according to the testimony. He doesn't shout. He doesn't fight. And he complains in the beginning, right? Because again, it's a very big shock for your brothers to betray you, to try to kill you, to sell you. But after this, he outgrows the situation and understands that it's bigger than him, and that he has a faith and a promise that was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that doesn't matter how many times we debate on YouTube videos, Facebook, anything. At the end of the day, the work that needs to be done is the proclamation of the good news, the establishment of the kingdom. And the only way we do that, guys, is serving and manifesting God's word through our lives. Keys do not represent the faith. Actions will speak louder than words. And so, it says that the servant whom I strengthen, the strengthening comes from the eye. He was chosen, Yeshua, and he was pleased in the Father. And God put his spirit on him. And we are called to wait for his instructions. So, let's not raise our voice to shout in public. Let's not crush the weakest reed or put out the flickering candles. Let's bring justice to all who have been wronged. We're not going to lose heart till justice prevails throughout the earth. And we will wait for our Messiah's instructions. This is what Joseph did. And when the time came, he realized that what his brothers did was used to bless many nations. So, let's be a light. Let's let our light shine. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something new. I hope it makes sense. I hope it sounds good. My new microphone. Hopefully it was not, good quality. Thank you for watching. Like I always say, like, subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, a wonderful Hanukkah. Light up all those candles. Have a beautiful time with your families. Let's rededicate ourselves. Let's focus. Let's silence and start living and acting according to our faith. Have a great week. Shavua Tov and Shabbat Shalom.